The Prime Minister's former chief advisor, Mr. Cummings, has given evidence to a joint meeting of the Science and Technology Select Committee about the government's response to coronavirus. Last week, the political strategist made a series of extraordinary and potentially damaging claims, including accusing Mr. Johnson of wanting to be injected with COVID live on television to reassure the public there was nothing to be scared of. Mr. Cummings stressed that actions from ministers and officials during the crisis fell disastrously short of the standards expected. He told MPs, the view of various officials inside Number 10 was if we have the Prime Minister chairing Cobra meetings and he just tells everyone, it's swine flu, don't worry about it, I'm going to get Chris Whitty to inject me live on TV with coronavirus so everyone realizes it's nothing to be frightened of, that would not help actually serious panic. Meanwhile, Labour leader Keir Starmer has used his weekly chance to question the Prime Minister to bring up some of these serious allegations. Mr. Johnson denied that his inaction led to needless deaths at the beginning of the pandemic, and in reference to Mr. Cummings accusing him of failing to realise the severity of COVID-19, he said, I don't think anybody can accuse this government of being complacent about the virus. As many question if Mr. Cummings' claims will end up damaging the Conservatives, James Kirkup, the director of the Social Market Foundation, argued Mr. Johnson should be more worried about Conservative MP Steve Baker. Last week, Mr. Baker warned Mr. Johnson that plans to punish homeowners who fail to buy costly green boilers could spark riots. Number 10 scrambled to defuse fears of huge fines for those not switching to eco-alternatives such as heat pumps. However, it refused to rule out possible stealth taxes and gas price rises. Some Tory MPs say the government is being dishonest about the reality of its aim to make the UK carbon neutral by 2050. Writing for The Sun, Mr. Baker said, the elite policymakers who govern our lives agree we should reduce our carbon emissions, but they have not been upfront about the cost for working families. He hinted current proposals could spark unrest not seen since the 90s, saying, the cost of net zero could deliver a political crisis greater than the poll tax. Mr. Kirkup added that Mr. Johnson should be wary of Mr. Baker, as the former Tory minister has a fair track record of disrupting official plans. He wrote, he drove the European research group that helped give Britain a much harder Brexit than it might have done. He's clearly aiming here at the segment of public opinion that underpinned the Leave vote, cost of living voters who are open to claims that things are being imposed on them by what Baker calls elite policymakers. Those voters are now a key plank of Tory support, in the Red Wall, and elsewhere. And Baker is prominently arguing that net zero is going to be bad, or at least, unfairly expensive, for them. Mr. Kirkup concluded in his piece for The Spectator, Boris Johnson, often accused of succumbing to short-term populism in other areas of policy, has so far been steadfast in his commitment to net zero. He's the ideal person to make that policy properly popular among his core voters. Steve Baker won his last war, but Boris Johnson can point to his own record of political victories too. He'll survive Dominic Cummings's attacks, voters have already made up their minds about the pandemic, and he can see off Steve Baker on net zero too, if he puts his mind to it. In a recent report, head of Oxford-based think tank Euro-Intelligence, Wolfgang Munchau agreed with Mr. Kirkup. He wrote, the director of the Social Market Foundation, believes the big issue is gas boilers. This is not as unreasonable as it sounds. Part of the government's green policy is the obligatory replacement of gas boilers in private homes by heat pumps, which he says would cost more than £10,000 to install. There is understandable opposition to what constitutes a massive household tax. Unsurprisingly, the people who lead the opposition were also leading figures in the Brexit campaign. Mr. Johnson said about his 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution, although this year has taken a very different path to the one we expected, I haven't lost sight of our ambitious plans to level up across the country. My 10-point plan will create, support and protect hundreds of thousands of green jobs, whilst making strides towards net zero by 2050. Our green industrial revolution will be powered by the wind turbines of Scotland and the North East, propelled by the electric vehicles made in the Midlands and advanced by the latest technologies developed in Wales, so we can look ahead to a more prosperous, greener future.